You know that feeling when you realize you've been living with a professional critic who never clocked out? That was my reality for the past 3 years. My wife had turned finding fault in everything I did into what seemed like her life's greatest achievement. It started small, like most toxic patterns do. A comment here about how I loaded the dishwasher wrong. A sigh there about how I folded the towels incorrectly. But somewhere along the way, criticizing me became her full-time occupation, and I was too busy trying to keep the peace to notice I'd become her favorite target practice. Last Tuesday morning, I woke up and made coffee the exact same way I had for the past 5 years. Before I could even take my first sip, she walked into the kitchen and immediately started. "You're using too much coffee again. Do you realize how expensive that is? And why is there water on the counter? Can't you clean up after yourself?" I looked at the counter. There were maybe 3 drops of water near the coffee maker. 3 drops. I grabbed a paper towel and wiped it up without saying a word. This seemed to annoy her even more. "Don't give me that attitude," she said, even though I hadn't said anything at all. "I'm just trying to help you be more considerate. Help me be more considerate." That was her favorite phrase, and I was starting to realize it was code for, "I enjoy making you feel inadequate." The breaking point came that Friday evening. We were at our friend's house for dinner, and I was actually having a good time for once. I was telling a story about something funny that happened at work when she cut me off mid-sentence. "He always exaggerates these stories," she said to everyone at the table, with that fake laugh she used when she wanted to seem playful while delivering a cut. Half of what he says probably didn't even happen. The entire table went quiet. Our friends looked uncomfortable, and I felt something snap inside me. Not anger exactly, but a crystal clear moment of realization. She had just humiliated me in front of people I cared about, and she was smiling while doing it. I finished my story anyway, calmly and without acknowledging her comment. But I was done, completely done. The drive home was silent, but my mind was racing. I started thinking about all the times she had criticized me that week alone. Monday, she told me I was breathing too loud while she was watching TV. Tuesday, the coffee incident. Wednesday, she criticized how I said goodbye to her in the morning, claiming I sounded dismissive. Thursday, she found fault with the way I organized my desk in the home office. When we got home, she tried to act like nothing had happened. "That was fun tonight," she said, as if she hadn't just embarrassed me in front of our friends. I looked at her and realized something profound. I couldn't remember the last time she had said something genuinely positive to me. Not in weeks, maybe months. Every interaction had become an opportunity for her to point out something wrong with me. "We need to talk," I said. She rolled her eyes. "About what now?" "About how you speak to me." "Oh, here we go. You're being sensitive again." Sensitive. Another one of her favorite words. Anytime I had a legitimate concern, I was being sensitive. It was her way of dismissing any attempt at honest conversation. But this time, I wasn't backing down. I had spent 3 years trying to be the husband she wanted, adjusting my behavior, walking on eggshells, accepting her constant corrections as normal. I had convinced myself that her criticism meant she cared about making our relationship better. Now I could see the truth. She enjoyed having power over me. She liked making me feel small, and she had gotten so comfortable doing it that she was willing to humiliate me publicly. I went to bed that night with a decision forming in my mind. I wasn't going to live like this anymore. I wasn't going to spend the rest of my life being criticized for existing. And I certainly wasn't going to let her turn me into some broken version of myself who apologized for breathing. The next morning, I woke up with absolute clarity. My wife had made criticizing me her full-time job, and this week, leaving her was about to become my life mission. The next morning, I decided to conduct a little experiment. I was going to pay attention to every single criticism that came out of her mouth for the next 2 days. Not to argue with it, not to defend myself, but just to document it mentally. I wanted to see if my suspicions were correct. I didn't have to wait long. Before I was even fully awake, she was already starting. "Your alarm went off 3 times this morning. Do you know how disruptive that is to my sleep? Why can't you just wake up when it goes off the first time?" I had been hitting snooze, something I'd done maybe twice in the past month. But she made it sound like I was torturing her every single morning. I made a mental note. Criticism number 1, and I wasn't even out of bed yet. By the time I finished my shower, she had added 3 more to the list. I was taking too long in the bathroom. I left the towel hanging wrong, and I was making too much noise getting dressed. For criticisms before breakfast. At breakfast, she criticized how I buttered my toast. Apparently, I was wasteful with the butter. Then she criticized me for reading the news on my phone while eating, calling it rude, even though she was doing the exact same thing. 6 criticisms before I left for work, and it was only 7 in the morning. I started paying closer attention to the pattern. She criticized me when she was in a good mood and when she was in a bad mood, when she was busy and when she was bored, when we were alone and when we were around other people. The common denominator wasn't my behavior. It was her need to find something wrong. That evening, I called my older brother. He'd been married for 15 years and had always given me solid advice. "Let me ask you something," I said. "How often does your wife criticize you?" He was quiet for a moment. "What do you mean?" "I mean, how often does she point out things you're doing wrong or could be doing better?" "I don't know, maybe once or twice a week. Usually when I actually mess something up." "What? Once or twice a week?" I was getting that many criticisms before my first cup of coffee was finished. My wife criticized me 17 times yesterday, I told him. I counted. 17 times? What did you do? Burn the house down. That's just it. I didn't do anything unusual. I lived a completely normal day, and she found 17 things wrong with how I did it. My brother was quiet for a long moment. That's not normal, man. That's not even close to normal. Hearing someone else say it made something click. I had been so focused on trying to fix whatever was wrong with me that I hadn't stopped to consider that maybe the problem wasn't me at all. The next day, I continued my experiment. The criticisms started even earlier. She criticized me for how I got out of bed, claiming I was stomping around when I was actually trying to be quiet. Then she criticized me for being too quiet, saying I was skulking around the house. I couldn't win. If I was loud, I was inconsiderate. If I was quiet, I was suspicious. If I talked, I was annoying. If I didn't talk, I was giving her the silent treatment. By lunch, I had counted 12 criticisms, and I realized something disturbing. She was getting more creative with them. She was finding fault with things that had never bothered her before. The way I breathed during a phone call, how I organized the papers on my desk, the tone of my voice when I said good morning. It was like she was actively looking for reasons to be disappointed in me. That evening, she outdid herself. She criticized me for the way I parked in our own driveway, claiming I was too close to her car, even though there was plenty of space. Then she criticized me for taking too long to come inside, saying I was dawdling. When I offered to help with dinner, she criticized my offer, saying I was just trying to get in the way. I stood there in our kitchen, watching her find fault with my very existence, and realized the truth. This had nothing to do with improving our relationship or helping me become better. This was about control. This was about her needing to feel superior, and the only way she could do that was by making me feel inferior. 23 criticisms in one day. 23 separate moments where she felt the need to tell me I was doing something wrong. And these weren't major issues. They were tiny, insignificant things that she had blown up into personal failings. I went to bed that night with a new understanding. My wife hadn't just developed the habit of criticizing me. She had developed an addiction to it. She was addicted to the feeling of being right, of being better, of having something to complain about. And I had been feeding that addiction for 3 years by apologizing, by trying to do better, by accepting her criticism as valid feedback instead of recognizing it for what it really was. Emotional abuse disguised as help. The experiment was over. I had my answer. Tomorrow, things were going to change. The next evening, I decided it was time for that conversation. I had all the evidence I needed from my 2-day experiment, and I wasn't going to let her dismiss this as me being sensitive again. She was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, when I sat down across from her. "We need to talk about how you speak to me," I said, keeping my voice calm and direct. She didn't even look up from her phone. "What are you talking about now?" "I'm talking about the fact that you criticized me 23 times yesterday. 23 separate times you found something wrong with what I was doing." Now she looked up, but with that familiar expression of annoyance. "I don't criticize you. I'm trying to help you." "Help me with what? Help me breathe quieter? Help me park better in my own driveway? Help me butter my toast the right way?" She rolled her eyes. "You're being dramatic." "Am I?" "Because I kept count. Yesterday morning, before I even got out of bed, you had already found 4 things wrong with me. 4 things. Before I was even fully awake." "I don't know what you want from me," she said, finally putting her phone down. "I'm supposed to just ignore it when you do things wrong? What exactly did I do wrong when I got out of bed? You said I was stomping around, but I was actually trying to be quiet. Then you said I was being too quiet and skulking around. So tell me, what's the right way to get out of bed?" She stared at me for a moment, and I could see her trying to figure out how to justify the contradictions. "You're twisting my words." "I'm not twisting anything. I'm asking you a simple question. What's the right way to get out of bed that won't result in criticism?" "This is ridiculous. You're making a big deal out of nothing. 23 criticisms in one day is nothing." Her tone shifted, becoming more defensive. "Maybe if you actually listened to what I was saying instead of getting all defensive, you'd understand that I'm trying to help our relationship. Help our relationship by making me feel like I can't do anything right. You're being way too sensitive about this." There it was, the magic word that was supposed to end all conversations and make me back down. But this time, I wasn't backing down. "No, I'm not being sensitive. I'm being observant. And what I've observed is that you find fault with everything I do, regardless of how I do it. You criticize me for being too loud, and criticize me for being too quiet. You criticize me for trying to help with dinner, then criticize me for not helping enough last week. Nothing I do is ever right." She stood up, clearly agitated. "Fine. You want me to stop trying to help you become a better person? I'll stop. But don't come crying to me when you're walking around like a slob with no consideration for anyone else." "There it is," I said, standing up too. "Right there. You just proved my point. You can't even have a conversation about this without turning it into another criticism. I'm not criticizing you. I'm stating facts. Facts. It's a fact that I'm a slob. It's a fact that I have no consideration for others." She crossed her arms. "You said you didn't want me to help you anymore, so I won't. I never said I didn't want help. I said I wanted you to stop criticizing me for every little thing I do." There's a difference between helping someone and constantly tearing them down. I don't tear you down. You told our friends last week that I exaggerate stories and that half of what I say probably didn't happen. In front of everyone. How is that not tearing me down? Her face flushed slightly. I was just joking around. Were you? Because it didn't feel like a joke. It felt like you were humiliating me in front of people I care about. She was quiet for a moment, and I thought maybe, just maybe, she was starting to see my point. But then she doubled down. If you can't handle a little teasing, that's your problem, not mine. I've been married to you for 3 years. I think I know you well enough to joke around. That wasn't joking around. That was you undermining me publicly, and you know it. Oh my God, you're so dramatic. Everything is such a big deal with you. I looked at her, really looked at her, and realized something profound. She genuinely didn't see anything wrong with her behavior. In her mind, she was the victim here. I was the one being unreasonable, being dramatic, being too sensitive. You know what? I said, my voice getting quieter but more firm. You're right. I am being dramatic. I'm being dramatic about wanting to be treated with basic respect in my own home. I'm being dramatic about not wanting to be criticized for existing. That's not what I do. That's exactly what you do. And the fact that you can't see it, or won't admit it, tells me everything I need to know. She stared at me, and I could see the wheels turning. She was trying to figure out how to spin this back on me, how to make me the problem again. Fine, she said finally. I'll try to be more careful about how I say things. But you need to stop being so defensive about everything. Even her attempt at compromise came with a criticism. Even when she was supposedly agreeing to change, she couldn't resist getting one more dig in. No, I said, I'm done with this conversation, and I'm done with this dynamic. I'm not going to defend myself anymore for things that don't need defending. I walked toward the stairs, but she called after me. So what? You're just going to ignore me now. I turned back to look at her. I'm not going to ignore you. But I'm also not going to engage with criticism that serves no purpose other than to make you feel superior. What's that supposed to mean? It means the next time you feel the need to criticize how I breathe, or how I walk, or how I exist in my own home, you'll be talking to yourself. I went upstairs, and for the first time in 3 years, I felt like I had drawn a line in the sand. The question now was whether she would respect it or try to cross it. Based on everything I knew about her, I had a feeling I already knew the answer. The next morning was my first test. I came downstairs to make coffee, and within 30 seconds, she was already starting. You left the bathroom light on again last night. Do you have any idea how much electricity costs? I looked at her, poured my coffee, and said nothing. Not a word. She stared at me, clearly expecting the usual apology or explanation. When it didn't come, she tried again. Did you hear me? I said you left the light on. I took a sip of my coffee and checked my phone. Still nothing from me. Are you seriously going to ignore me? I looked up at her with a calm expression. Good morning. How did you sleep? She blinked, thrown off by the normal greeting after her criticism had been completely dismissed. Fine. But we need to talk about the electric bill. We can definitely talk about the electric bill, I said. But we're not going to talk about me leaving a light on for 2 minutes like it's some kind of character flaw. Her face went through several expressions as she processed this. She wasn't used to me distinguishing between reasonable conversations and petty criticism. It's wasteful, she said, but with less conviction than usual. Noted, I said, and went back to my phone. This became my new strategy. Ignore the petty stuff completely. Engage only when she spoke to me with basic respect. It was simple, but it absolutely drove her crazy. By the 3rd day, she was escalating. When ignoring my minor infractions didn't get the reaction she wanted, she started manufacturing bigger problems. You never help around the house anymore, she said while I was literally loading the dishwasher. I looked at her, looked at my hands currently placing dishes in the dishwasher, and said, really? Never. You know what I mean. Actually, I don't. I'm helping around the house right now. So explain to me how I never help. She couldn't, because it was ridiculous. But instead of backing down, she got more aggressive. You're being difficult on purpose. I'm being accurate. You said I never help around the house while I'm actively helping around the house. That's not difficult. That's just factual. This pattern continued for a week. Every time she made an exaggerated criticism, I'd calmly point out the contradiction. Every time she tried to make me feel guilty for existing, I'd respond with either silence or sarcasm. When she criticized how I was sitting on the couch, I asked her to demonstrate the proper sitting technique. When she criticized how I answered the phone, I handed her the phone and asked her to show me the right way. The sarcasm seemed to bother her more than anything else, because it meant I wasn't taking her seriously anymore. You're being such a smart aleck lately, she said after I asked her to show me the correct way to open a door. I'm being a smart aleck? You criticized me for how I opened a door. A door. I turned the handle and pushed it open, and you found something wrong with that. So please, show me the proper door opening technique. She realized how ridiculous she sounded, but instead of stopping, she got angry. You're not the same person I married. You're right. The person you married would have apologized for opening the door wrong. This person thinks that's insane. That's when she started recruiting backup. She called her mother, her sister, and her best friend, painting me as the villain who was suddenly being impossible to live with. I found out about this when her mother called me directly. Your wife is very upset, she said. She says you're not communicating with her anymore. I'm communicating just fine. I'm just not apologizing for things that don't warrant apologies. Marriage is about compromise. Absolutely. But compromise requires two people. When one person constantly criticizes and the other person constantly apologizes, that's not compromise. That's submission. Her mother went quiet for a moment. She says you're being very disrespectful. Can you give me an example of how I've been disrespectful? Well, she said you ignored her when she was trying to help you with household management. Household management? She criticized me for how I opened a door. That's not household management. That's control. The conversation ended awkwardly, but I could tell her mother was starting to see the situation differently. The real test came at the end of the week. We were supposed to go to dinner with another couple, and she was clearly planning to use the social pressure to force me back into my old patterns. In the car, she started her preparation. Please don't embarrass me tonight by being all weird and defensive. I looked at her. I'm not planning to be weird or defensive. Are you planning to criticize me in front of our friends again? I don't criticize you in front of people. Last time we went out, you told everyone I exaggerate stories and that half of what I say probably didn't happen. That was different. How was it different? She couldn't answer that, so she tried a different approach. Just try to be normal tonight, okay? I'll be exactly as normal as you are, I said. If you treat me with respect, you'll get respect back. If you try to humiliate me, well, we'll see how that goes. I could see her processing this, trying to figure out if I was bluffing or if I was serious. She was about to find out just how serious I was. The dinner started normally enough. We were at a nice restaurant with another couple we'd known for years, and for the first hour, she was actually behaving. I was starting to think maybe she had gotten the message. I should have known better. It started when I was telling everyone about a project at work that had gone really well. I was genuinely excited about it, and our friends were interested and asking questions. That's when she decided to strike. He's making it sound way more impressive than it actually was, she said with that fake laugh. He had a whole team helping him, but he's telling it like he did everything himself. The table went quiet. Our friends looked uncomfortable, just like last time. But this time I was ready. I smiled and nodded. You're absolutely right. I did have a team helping me, just like you have a team helping you with your full-time job. She looked confused. What full-time job? Criticizing me. I mean, you've got your mom, your sister, your best friend, all helping you come up with new ways to point out my flaws. It's really impressive teamwork. Our friends shifted in their seats, not sure if I was joking or not. But I wasn't done. In fact, just today she managed to criticize how I opened a door. A door. I'm still trying to figure out the wrong way to open a door, but apparently I found it. She was staring at me, her face getting red. You're being ridiculous. Am I? This week alone you've criticized how I breathe, how I walk, how I sit, how I open doors, how I close doors, how I eat, how I don't eat, how I talk, how I don't talk. I'm honestly impressed by your creativity. Most people run out of material after a few days, but you keep finding new things. Our male friend started chuckling. Wait, she really criticized how you breathe. Oh yes. Apparently I breathe too loud during phone calls, but also too quiet when I'm sleeping, because that makes her worry that I'm dead. Now both our friends were looking at her with raised eyebrows. She was realizing that her usual tactic of public humiliation was backfiring spectacularly. You're exaggerating, she said, but her voice was smaller now. Am I? Yesterday you told me I was loading the dishwasher wrong. Then when I asked you to show me the right way, you couldn't do it. You just said I should figure it out, because you shouldn't have to explain everything to me. Our female friend looked at her. You really said that? She was trapped. She couldn't deny it without lying, but admitting it made her look exactly as petty as she was. I was just trying to help him be more efficient, she said weakly. Efficient at what? Opening doors? Breathing? Existing in my own home without constant correction. I leaned back in my chair, completely calm. Here's what's funny. She told me tonight to try to be normal. But normal for me has become apologizing for things that don't need apologies. Normal has become walking on eggshells in my own house. Normal has become accepting criticism for literally everything I do. Our friends were staring at her now, and she knew it. She tried to laugh it off. He's being so dramatic. This is exactly what I mean. Dramatic? I counted 23 criticisms in one day last week. 23. Should I have counted 24? The silence at the table was deafening. Our friends were looking at her like they were seeing her for the first time. You counted? Our male friend asked. I had to. I thought maybe I was going crazy, thinking she was criticizing me more than she actually was. Turns out I was underestimating. She stood up abruptly. I need to use the restroom. After she left, our friends immediately turned to me. Dude, is it really that bad? Our male friend asked. Worse. What you just saw was her on good behavior because we're in public. Our female friend shook her head. I had no idea. We thought you guys were happy. I thought we were too, until I realized that being happy meant accepting that I'm apparently incapable of doing anything correctly. When she came back from the restroom, the dynamic had completely shifted. Our friends were polite but distant with her, and she could feel it. The rest of the dinner was awkward, with her trying to overcompensate by being overly nice to me, which just made everything more obvious. On the drive home, she was furious. You humiliated me in front of our friends. I kept my eyes on the road. I told the truth. If the truth humiliates you, maybe the problem isn't the truth. You made me look like some kind of terrible wife. I didn't make you look like anything. I described your behavior accurately. If you don't like how that makes you look, change your behavior. I can't believe you counted my comments. That's psychotic. What's psychotic is criticizing your husband 23 times in one day and thinking that's normal. She was quiet for a moment, then tried a different approach. Fine, I'll stop commenting on things. But you have to stop being so defensive about everything. Even now, even after being completely exposed in front of our friends, she couldn't admit fault without blaming me too. No, I said, pulling into our driveway. I'm done negotiating about basic respect. I'm done compromising about being treated like a human being in my own home. What's that supposed to mean? I turned off the car and looked at her. It means I'm done with this marriage. The words hung in the air between us. She stared at me, trying to figure out if I was serious. You don't mean that. I've never been more serious about anything in my life. We sat there in the driveway, the weight of those words settling over both of us. She had pushed and pushed, assuming I would always bend. But tonight, she had learned that even the most patient person has a breaking point, and she had just found mine. She didn't believe me at first. When we got inside the house that night, she acted like I had just said something dramatic in the heat of the moment that I'd regret by morning. You're upset right now, she said, following me upstairs. Let's talk about this tomorrow when you've calmed down. I turned to look at her. I am calm. I've been thinking about this for weeks. You can't be serious about ending our marriage over this. I'm not ending our marriage over this. You ended our marriage with this. I'm just acknowledging what's already happened. The next morning, I called a lawyer. I had done my research during those weeks of observation, and I knew exactly what I needed to do. While she was at work, I started gathering documents and making arrangements. She came home that evening to find me packing. What are you doing? I'm leaving. You can't just leave. We need to talk about this. I stopped packing and looked at her. We've been talking about this for 3 years. Every time I tried to address how you speak to me, you dismissed it. Every time I asked for basic respect, you call me sensitive. There's nothing left to talk about. I said I would try to be better. No, you said you would try to be more careful about how you say things. That's not the same as changing. That's just being more subtle about the same behavior. She sat down on the bed, and I could see panic starting to set in. We can go to counseling. We can work this out. Counseling only works when both people think there's a problem. You don't think there's a problem. You think I'm the problem. That's not true. Last night, even after being called out in front of our friends, you still couldn't apologize without blaming me for being defensive. Even your attempt to change came with a criticism. I continued packing while she sat there, trying to process that I was actually serious. Where are you going to go? I've rented a house across town. The lease starts tomorrow. You already rented a house? When? 2 days ago, right after our conversation on the couch. She was starting to understand that this wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. I had been planning this methodically. You can't just throw away 3 years of marriage. I stopped and looked at her. I'm not throwing anything away. You threw it away every time you chose to tear me down instead of build me up. You threw it away every time you made me feel like I was inadequate for existing. I never meant to make you feel that way. Intent doesn't matter when the impact is the same every single day. Over the next few days, as I continued moving my things out, she went through every stage of grief. First denial, then anger. You're being incredibly selfish, she said. Marriage is supposed to be for better or worse. For better or worse doesn't mean accepting abuse. And yes, what you've been doing is abuse. It's just emotional instead of physical. Then came bargaining. I'll change. I promise I'll change. I didn't realize how bad it was. You had 3 years to realize. You had dozens of conversations where I tried to explain how your criticism was affecting me. You chose not to listen. Give me one more chance. I gave you hundreds of chances. Every morning I woke up hoping today would be different was another chance. When bargaining didn't work, she moved to depression. I don't know how to live without you. You'll figure it out. You managed to live without constantly criticizing me for the first 25 years of your life. Finally, she tried one last desperate attempt. What about all the good times we had? What about our plans for the future? I looked at her, and for a moment, I felt a flicker of the old sympathy. But then I remembered the past 3 years, and my resolve strengthened. What good times? When was the last time we had a conversation where you didn't find something wrong with me? When was the last time you complimented me instead of correcting me? She couldn't answer that question because we both knew the truth. On my last day in the house, she made one final plea. I love you. No, you don't. You love having someone to control. You love feeling superior. You love having a target for your criticism. But you don't love me, because if you loved me, you would never have treated me the way you did. I picked up my last box and headed for the door. Where does this leave us? She asked. It leaves you with exactly what you wanted, a life where you don't have to worry about my inadequate door-opening techniques or my improper breathing patterns. And it leaves me with something I haven't had in 3 years, peace. 3 months later, I was settled in my new place, and the difference was remarkable. I could make coffee without being criticized. I could breathe without commentary. I could exist without constant correction. I heard through mutual friends that she was telling people I had changed and become impossible to live with. She was painting herself as the victim of my sudden transformation into an unreasonable person. But our friends who had witnessed that dinner knew better. Word was getting around about what really happened, and she was learning that public opinion wasn't as sympathetic as she had expected. As for me, I was rediscovering who I was when I wasn't constantly defending my basic right to exist. I was more confident, more relaxed, more myself than I had been in years. My brother visited one weekend and said something that stuck with me. "You look different, man. Lighter." He was right. For 3 years, I had been carrying the weight of trying to be perfect for someone who would never be satisfied. Now that weight was gone. My wife had turned criticizing me into her full-time job, and leaving her had become my life mission. Mission accomplished, and I had never been happier to complete a project.
Our story has come to an end. If you've made it this far, how about subscribing to our channel? It helps us immensely. I've selected 2 other videos for you that I'm sure you'll enjoy. Feel free to click on them. I'll be waiting for you in the next story. See you soon.